Good morning, good people. It is a gift and a joy, appropriately in our theme for today, for me to reprise a series I took up in Advent last year on what are we waiting for, which is meant, of course, for this Advent season, focusing our hearts and our minds and our spirits. As we are told, and I'm reminding folks from the pulpit this morning, we are told, of course, that this is a season in which we are to wait, but what helps us in that work is to remind ourselves of exactly what, which is really to say who it is that we are waiting for that is worthy of the waiting. And music of the season, music for me, I've realized over the years is actually probably my most both intimate and powerful prayer language. It is the way that I commune with God most naturally, which is what prayer fundamentally is and is about. And so this season, we know, is one, if not the pinnacle of the seasons that we travel through in which music really captures and captivates our imaginations. And it's not just because it's novel. It's not just because we pull this music out once a year. It's because the music itself actually trains our eyes and our hearts on what this season is about. You put those two things together, the novelty and the meaning and the intention, if you can put those two things together, then that makes for incredibly meaningful and powerful spiritual encounter and deepening of relationship with God, which is ultimately always our goal. So, I'm going to make sure that this works. This is where I do my... It seems that perhaps it's not. Is it on? No, it's not on there. Okay. Just Thank you. As if I needed one more reminder. I got it. So I've titled this, just remember, The Music of the Season. And this is really to tease out the tension of what lies in when we talk about music in this season, which is to say, the music of which season? Advent, or dare we say Christmas? Okay? And so this is one of the things I like. I threw this out last year. I want to remind you that even I was saying to Liz Parker, our affiliated retired clergy this morning coming out of the 8 o'clock service, that some of the best Advent language shows up in Christmas carols. So there is some overlap. There are invitations. By the time we actually get to sing those great Advent lines in the Christmas carols, Advent is already over. So this is part of the reason, which I'll lay out, for why I fundamentally feel with intention, if we delve into Christmas music in the season of Advent with an intention of the question, what is it and who is it we're waiting for? Not in the sense that we have already arrived, but tuning our hearts to what it is and who it is we're waiting for, it functions as Advent music. So we're going to explore some of what that looks like today. But let every heart prepare him room might be the most Advent-y line that's ever advented in Advent music anywhere within the history of Advent. And we don't get it until Christmas. And that's just wrong in my humble opinion. So this is my permission giving and another motion and movement of the day to lean into that. So this is another layer I want to introduce, and a reason why I think it's important for us to make sure that we spend ample attention on what this music offers to us in the season. That what this season, and by that I mean both Advent and Christmas combined, is this is a season for radical incarnationalists. Is that a term familiar to anyone in the room? It wasn't to me either. Until the first, actually of all times, it was a Good Friday, the first Good Friday I ever preached, my first Holy Week out of divinity school. I preached a small homily, and I came down afterwards, and my mentor at the time came up to me. He was the first person that I spoke to after. He's like, "You are a radical incarnationalist." I said, "Great, that sounds wonderful. What is that?" And what I've come to learn is that it's rooted very much, it's the father figure of radical incarnation is Irenaeus of Lyon. At the time he was there, it was not called Lyon, it was a Roman outpost there, but he wrote back then, he was a student of another great name of the ancient church, Polycarp, and he wrote, "The word of God, our Lord Jesus Christ, did through his transcendent love become what we are, that he might bring us to be even what he is himself." Jesus comes into the world to become what we are, becoming human, choosing to become human out of his own volition, that he might, in his own humanity, elevate us in our humanity to our highest reaches. That having him as our example and his showing us the way, and also the intimacy of relationship that is opened up between us and God, and knowing that God knows all that it is to be fully human because Jesus became not partially human, not half human, not 3/4 human, fully human. Fully human. That is the radical part of radical incarnationalism. And so the invitation of what it means to be a radical incarnationalist is to consider the fullness of Jesus' humanity as a way to understand God's deep desire to understand the fullness of who we are and what we go through in this world, and to have in him the example for which we can strive. Both of those things function. And they exist. This is a beautiful collect within our prayer book that, quite frankly, very few people actually get to hear because most folks aren't in church on the second Sunday of Christmas. But it illustrates this powerfully. "O God, who wonderfully created and yet more wonderfully restored the dignity of human nature." God creates human beings and then brings the human beings to their fullness by becoming human. Grant that we may share the divine life of him who humbled himself to share our humanity. Okay? That we might actually achieve and connect with the divinity that has been placed by us because we have been created by the God who made all things. But we achieve the fullness of the capacity of our divinity by reaching for the fullness of Jesus' humanity. That's what it means to be a radical incarnationalist. And I have claimed this proudly ever since that Good Friday, and I am a long ways from fully achieving my understanding. But that's what I love about this season each and every year, because it is ripe and rife with opportunity to dive deeper in the story of Jesus coming into the world, to understand what it means that Jesus became human, and within my own humanity, what I am to do with that. So that's laying the groundwork. So what do we learn about God through Jesus' incarnation? This is the invitation spiritually that we have before us right now. So radical in our incarnation means that all the Jesus' human details matter. And our imagination of the details that we don't have to fill in those gaps is actually a holy encounter. That when we train our imaginations to think about in a form of compassion, actually, what Jesus' earthly existence was like. It's an invitation and an exercise in meeting God in relationship. And so music as a core practice of a way of expressing our humanity is the perfect lens, in my humble opinion, to examine Christ's own humanity. So that's what we're about in this mini-series and what we're going to get at. So I'm going to take you through today 2 songs, 3 versions, 2 songs. One of them will be 2 versions. This is a song that comes out of one of my absolute favorite albums for this season of all time. It was released in 2008 by Yo-Yo Ma. And in that, the whole album is collaborations that he has with all sorts of extraordinary musicians. And each one of his collaborators got to pick a song that they wanted to do with him. And one of his key collaborators was Renee Fleming. And she was the one who picked us this song called Touch the Hand of Love. It is a song originally, it was not original to her, it's original by the jazz vocalist Blossom Dearie, who died by the time that this recording was made. And she had it arranged by Edgar Meyer, who's a bass player and a MacArthur Genius Grant Award winner, and collaborated with Yo-Yo Ma on something called the Goat Rodeo Project. Yo-Yo Ma did a bluegrass album, if you can imagine that, and he was so they're all classical trained string players playing bluegrass. And in that part of that collaboration was a mandolin player named Chris Thiele. And you may know Chris Thiele through he took over for Garrison Keillor on hosting a Prairie Home Companion for a time. So you'll hear his mandolin in the background. And the rest of it is instruments played by members of what's called the Silk Road Ensemble, which is an initiative that Yo-Yo Ma started to try and tease out and illustrate for the world the connection of musical traditions of cultures throughout the world. The first conduit of that emerged through the Silk Road itself. And that's been in existence for a couple of, I would say at least 15 years now. What's interesting, and I'm going to play this song for you in a moment, but what's interesting, and I'll tee this up, is that Blossom Dearie there was an album of Christmas music that was put out of hers posthumously. But this song is not included on that album. But it was picked by Renee Fleming for an album of this season. So I'm going to play this and we'll take a listen together. Again, if I can get this to work. Let's see.
Touch the hand of love, let it calm your troubled mind and caress your tender sorrow. Know the hand of love as you walk weary road, as you travel your tomorrows alone. You may have to wander far over thorns that bleed and scar you, and those rocky mountains you must climb will try to blind you. Touch the hand of love as you walk that weary road. Let it hold your tender tender sorrows as you travel your tomorrows alone. You may have to wander far over thorns that bleed and scar you, and those rocky mountains you must climb will try to blind you. Touch the hand of love as you walk that weary road. Let it hold your tender sorrows as you travel your tomorrows.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work again. Okay. So, thinking about what we heard. What makes this a Christmas song?
Well, the last candle is love, is it not?
Okay, Sharon's got the last candle of Advent is love on the Advent wreath. Yes, you are right. Of course you're right. Yes. So we have that love exists within our Advent and the rooting of our words for this season. Yes. What else? Anybody? Yeah.
To say, touch the hand of love, says that there's a hand extended to you. There's something tangible that can come into your life.
Yes. Yes, that there is a form of love that is reaching out for you, that is there to be touched, not just in theory, not just in some high-minded concept, not just out there somewhere beyond the horizon in the cosmos, but somewhere where you can actually touch and be touched. Anything else? What do we think this song is inviting us to consider about who God is and how God is? Barbara.
That God has suffered pain and he knows what we're going through.
That God has suffered pain and knows what we go through. Yeah. What else? Thank you. I heard something up front. Traveling alone. That's something that I found super interesting about that lyric because there's an irony to it, actually, right? It's speaking a word of being alone, but if you can be touch the hand of love, you can't be alone. So there's a yearning, and it hasn't happened yet, But there's a promise within it that a sense of being alone when we have it is not either true or forever. Anything else? And that's a promise that comes to us in the incarnation. Does this song shape how we feel about God in any sort of way? In the words itself or even just in the music? Susan.
I often think music is one of the ways that we feel closer to God.
Yeah.
And I love Yo-Yo Ma.
Sure, yeah. Music is the way we're being closer to God. And Yo-Yo Ma is, I think, probably, when people ask me who my favorite preachers are, Yo-Yo Ma is very close at the top of that list, if not at the top of it. Truly, I mean it. Anything else about how the music shapes how we feel about God? Okay.
I think we feel God's presence much more at that time.
Yeah.
It becomes more real, more human,
We feel God's presence becomes real. There's a tenderness, right? There's a visceral tenderness that exists at the same time in both in word and the tone of the music itself of longing, right? It's not a music it's minor key. It's all of a sense of there's an yearning and anticipation that is building to a hopefulness, an expectation of completion that hasn't quite come in this. And all of that, I think, is something that we experience of mutuality. So if we're experiencing that and feeling that about God, part of what this is to say that feeling is mutual, that God has that same yearning for longing and connection and touching us in the same way that we have for God. And so I'm going to come to something, right? This is the image that comes to mind for me as I listen to this song. All right, everybody know what this image is? It's the Sistine Chapel, right? And who are the two hands here? Adam and God, right? So it's the creation, and think back to that collect for the second Sunday of Christmas. The one who created all things reaching out to connect in both human hands, mind you, right? And they're not quite touching, but they're reaching out for one another. The implication is that they will, but it's not there yet. And that, I think this song has captivated my heart and my imagination in the season for exactly this. I hear this song and I feel this moment. And I feel within it that mutuality of longing. And that is not just how I feel about God, but that God feels about me and about our world. And there's tenderness and there's solemnness and there's solemnity about it. Okay, so that's song one that we're going to look at for this weekend. So we're going to shift gears in genre completely. And I think I may have shared this last year when I started this, was my very first year, the first song that I had last year was Dolly Parton's Hard Candy Christmas, which was the first song that I sort of encountered in this exercise that I took on for many years of finding and listening to sort of non-Christmas carol songs that don't appear on heavy rotation in commercial radio for the 6 to 8 weeks before Christmas that they do. In that same first season that I was doing this is when I encountered this song. Is anybody familiar with this? No Room at the Inn. So James Cleveland grew up in Chicago in the valence, in the orbit of Mahalia Jackson. He was a student of hers. And he eventually became C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father, hired him to be the musician for his church in Detroit. And so James Franklin ultimately became Aretha Franklin's piano teacher. And they formed this great bond throughout their lives that, if you know, when she returned to gospel music with great fanfare, she went to L.A., which is where he had formed his choir at that time, who he recorded this Christmas album with in the late 60s, to break back and be her collaborative partner in coming back to gospel. So the album of this was recorded in 1967, and it's built on a call and response format that's common both to spirituals and especially to modern gospel music. So I'll put some degree of, I've captured some of the lyrics, but it functions a little bit differently. Okay, where is it? Where are you? Now I've lost you. Aha. Let's see.
When Joseph and Mary had traveled far and finally reached the city of Bethlehem, and the time had fully come, this is what happened. There was no room. There was no room in the inn. They didn't have any room. That's what the manager said. No room in the inn. No room. No, no. When the time had fully come, oh, for the little Lord Jesus to be born, they had no room. Oh, they had no room. No, no. In the end. No, no. Now let me tell you something. The waiter and the porter, the bellboy, the maid and the cook, they're gonna be, yes they will. There is witness in judgment, for they saw that awful look. Yes, they did. And they heard. Oh, they heard the manager say, as he turned poor Mary away. We don't have no room. Oh, we don't have no room. That's what he said. In this hotel. No, no. Oh, no room. No room. No room. In the end. No, no. Oh.
I'm going to pause it there. So, what do we take away from this? As radical incarnationalists, as we now are working our way into being. What do we hear? You heard the Green Book. Just say one more line just to refresh our memories about the Green Book.
Book that told black people where they were
Yeah.
able to stay and where they were not.
Right. The publication tell African Americans where it was safe for them to stay in the Jim Crow South and not. Right. So in that sense, James Cleveland has taken Jesus' birth and the circumstances of all and mapped it directly onto his context, his life, his time, his humanity. Right? And so it has a different, more powerful meaning as a result, does it not? It's not something that happened long ago and far away. I am putting it right in the here and now of 1967, Whitney.
Well, there's an interesting contrast set up between the no room at the end for Christ and his parents, and the fact that Christ made room for everyone.
Yeah. Beautiful. So juxtaposition that Christ comes into the world having no room made for him and his he uses all of his humanity, again, the fullness of his humanity for the purpose of making room for all. Andy.
I was intrigued by the fact that all the people that worked there, who I imagine would have welcomed Mary and Joseph and Jesus, heard the manager
Yeah.
say, no room for you.
Yeah.
And when the manager said that, they go to the main.
Yeah. There's a power hierarchy structure involved. Yeah.
Growing up in the South, it sort of struck me that the roles of the men who couldn't afford a bellboy were typically occupied by African
Right.
and the manager was usually.
Right. So all the roles he listed that were typically occupied by African Americans being overturned, trumped at the end by a role that's typically held by a white person. Yeah, Sharon.
I was struck by the fact that no one welcomed them, but even though God still comes, even if we don't want him.
Yeah, God doesn't care whether God's not wanted. God's coming. And God's going to come. And then what are we invited to imagine? Where is the place where God will ultimately come into? Let's hold on to that for a moment. We're going to come back in a couple of seconds. Anything else in an invitation, a sense of what we're invited to imagine by this song? Shelley.
I kind of thought in both how lonely it must have been to Jesus.
Yeah.
In both songs.
How lonely it is to be Jesus in all of the circumstance. Yeah. I think, I'm going to play you in one more version of this that I think is going to add another layer quickly. But part of what James Cleveland has done, which is the story of how faithful Christians have done this over 2 millennia, is an invitation to us in our own time to imagine what this context is today. Where would, if this being the story, this being the tenor and the substance of the story, where would Jesus be born today? Receiving that same treatment. Hold on again. I'm gonna get us to 1967. 1967. So I want to play one more version of this, and I'm going to try and cue this up properly. Oh, there we go.
And the cook, you know the bellboy.
Here we go. We're just going to learn. This is Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra.
You know the bellboy and the porter, the waitress and the cook will be a witness one day in heaven when they tell what Mary took. She was driven away 'cause she had no place to stay. There wasn't no room at the inn. Can you believe it? You know there wasn't no room
All right. What's different? More joyful. Yeah, you can dance to that. I mean, I was ready to burst out. I was waiting for somebody to get up and get happy. All right. It's the same tune, mostly the same format, mostly the same song, an entirely different tone. So how does this shape and shift how we think about God, even from the layer that we heard in the first version, in the original version?
Well, it seems like they have a connection now.
Who has a connection?
The African-American people meeting him in heaven and meeting Mary in heaven.
Okay. So, keep going.
Just that each individual person.
Yeah. So, a meeting of the people who had experienced the sorrow and the divine. Anybody else?
I'm just thinking of Mary, it says, when Jesus is about to be born, and everybody's saying, sorry, there's no place for you. That is a very uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah, and I will say, so this version is 7.5 minutes long. I commend it to you, and it is one difference that it makes in the other sections is that this version actually spends a little more time in Mary's place, of her persistence in the face of her denial of being turned away.
The good news aspect, the joy that's being shown in this version, illustrates the looking back at the birth of Jesus. We now know what that brought.
Yes, okay.
Instead of focusing on the grief and the turmoil that Mary and Joseph were having, it focuses on the joy that we now know resulted from all.
It's bringing about the result of all the circumstances of Christ actually becoming born. So I want to return to this thing you may remember this from way back in February when we read Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited. He wrote, the masses of men, in the term, who live with their backs constantly against the wall. They are the poor, the disinherited, the dispossessed. What does our religion say to them? This is the answer to that question. The joy in the response, if you link both of the lenses of how this song is presented, is the answer to this question. It is the choice that God makes in taking on humanity to enter humanity in the context of being someone who is dispossessed. And God's choice to do that gives joy and hope and holiness to all those who exist and live with their backs against the wall. That is the Christian answer to that question that Howard Thurman ultimately got to. That is the power that God chooses to hallow first in humanity, those who are most marginalized. And that is the reality of the God that we have. And that we are invited to celebrate that is the God for whom we are waiting. So, thus concludes session 1 of this year's installation of What Are We Waiting For? We will pick up next week where we leave off with Howard Thurman. So I'm looking forward to that. We have one more week of that before Christmas arrives. All of this, before I sprint out of here to get to 11, a reminder, in speaking of no room at the inn, that tonight we have our practice of taking this on and kicking off Las Posadas. The Posadas are entirely about inhabiting the same spirit and substance and promise of no room at the inn. That's what it is. Posadas means inn. So if we want to inhabit what this looks like for us in this time and put our feet into the spirit and soul of the story of these songs and of Christ coming into the world and incarnation, we have our opportunity before us tonight and 8 other nights beginning on Tuesday in the neighborhoods. So if you aren't already planning to be a part of one, please, please, please do. All right, if you've already worshiped this morning, go out joyfully into the world. If you have not yet worshiped, we will see you joyfully in church in a few minutes. Bless you.